Hello, and welcome to People's Through the HR Lens, our comprehensive market update that looks at leading HR trends impacting the Australian workforce. I am Leanne Lazarus, Recruitment Manager here at the People Brisbane office. On today's show, we will be talking through legal missteps that can cost your company dearly when redundancies are looming. This week, we are joined by Jonathan Mamril, Director and Head of Employment Law at South Geldard Lawyers, to explore the critical legal implications of workforce redundancies during times of crisis. As of February 2025, Australia's annual retrenchment rate held steady at 1.7%, with around 233,800 workers being made redundant over the year. Growing uncertainty in the job market is fueling anxiety, with 68% of employees expressing concern about potential redundancies. We have seen certain industries be impacted by this, with others raising concerns for their future. In such uncertain times, it is more important than ever for employees to follow fair, transparent, and legally sound redundancy processes. To discuss this further, we are joined today by Director and Head of Employment Law at South Geldard Lawyers, Jonathan Mamril.
Thanks for having me, Leanne.
Jonathan, if we look up the term redundancy on Google, it will tell us that this is when a business no longer needs an employee's role to be done moving forward. And this can be due to a diverse range of factors that have led to this process: the economy, organizational restructure, financial uncertainty in the market, and so much more. If we look at Australia's legislation, what would the key legal obligations be for an employer when preparing for and delivering redundancies?
There's a number of legal obligations to consider, but there's probably a few key ones. Okay, so the very first one is it a genuine redundancy? And as you've stated just there, a redundancy requires a position to be no longer required to be worked by anyone. Okay, so it's not about the employee themselves. It's not about the performance, it's not about the behavior, it's not about their conduct, it's about that position. And that employee just happens to be in that position. So the first question is it a genuine redundancy, or is this done for other purposes? Okay, there's other nefarious purposes. So that's the first part. So what I usually like to see is there going to be some type of structure or corporate structure going forward where maybe some of those duties are absorbed or something like that going forward. Okay, that's the first part. The second part as well is have we just looked at redeployment? Are there redeployment opportunities for that employee? Okay, so can we redeploy them into potentially a different role? Okay, and then the other parts are probably the more process-driven parts. So in particular, if the employee is covered by an award or an enterprise agreement, there will usually be some sort of consultation process. And most of the consultation processes are relatively the same. But is there a consultation process with the employee prior to the redundancy being undertaken? And then, of course, you've got the payment side of things. So the payment of notice, the payment of the redundancy pay, and then, of course, all the other legal entitlements such as leave as well.
Okay. Now, the interesting thing is talking in the market and talking to a lot of organizations. Some organizations sometimes can be under the misconcept of that the process is different for an organization that potentially has 15 employees versus an organization that's 500, or even different industry sectors. Is that the case, or is it a standard requirement or process across, irrespective of size of organization?
Yeah, for small businesses, there are redundancy pay exemptions, but the process itself in terms of making a position redundant, well, there are going to be some similarities and some differences. So the very first thing you'll really need to look at is if you're covered under an award, not an award, or covered under an enterprise agreement, what are the steps required for a redundancy? Okay, so yes, it can be industry specific. It can also be that an enterprise agreement, especially if you are in an agreement where a union has negotiated that agreement with you, then yes, you're likely going to have a slightly different redundancy process. So the process there will be set out. But there are exemptions for small businesses when it comes to the pay, but the process itself will be relatively similar. And I suppose the thing as well is that we also need to keep in mind that yes, different industries have different award obligations when it comes to redundancies, but also there might be differences as well in terms of, say, you might have practical differences. So you might have office workers, you might have outdoor workers, you might have different shifts, you might have to utilize Teams, you might have to utilize virtual, you might have to make phone calls at different hours. So those things definitely have to be taken into consideration. And there are going to be some notification obligations, and there's going to be genuine consultation obligations intermixed with that. So yes, that can be a little bit tricky when it comes to process, industry size. Yes, for sure, there are going to be some differences.
Perfect. Now, obviously, from a employment law perspective, you and your team will be working with a lot of different organizations and providing them with guidance and advice. Based on your experience in this space, what is the most common legal missteps employers make during crisis-related layoffs?
I suppose there's quite a few. Probably one of the main ones is this really a genuine redundancy? Okay, so, and what I like to see from my clients is what the future looks like. Okay, so obviously there's been some work done. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said, hey, we're going to make this position redundant. But what does that actually look like? So I like to see what is going to be the new structure. What's going to be the new corporate structure? How it's structured? What's the reasons for it? Is it what's the operational reasons? What's the financial reasons? So go into depth. So basically, I want to see what does the business case say? Also, I want an understanding of when was this decision made. Okay, so I want to see the minutes of board meetings. I want to see the minutes of executive discussions, minutes with HR, email correspondence. So I want to see all that documentation to actually have a look at, okay, is there a general redundancy? The second part as well is, have they looked at redeployment opportunities? Okay, can this employee be redeployed in other parts of the organization? Why can't they be redeployed? Or, if there is a redeployment opportunity, what would that look like? So I like to see those two major aspects. Some other issues and obligations as well is if there's any complaints or grievances, or if there's any investigations, which might produce other issues such as general protections, or might produce issues around psychosocial safety, or it might produce issues around maybe an unfair dismissal, okay, or solidifies an unfair dismissal claim. So that's the other part as well. The other part as well is consultation. Okay, so having a genuine consultation with the employee. Now, it's not about if the decision's been made and there's consultation, the obligation is to enter into genuine consultation with the employee. That is essentially listening to what they have to say about the potential redundancy of the position. And they might come up with some good ideas. The employee might come up with some good ideas. All right, there might be ways to rectify the situation. May not be. So I want to see what is there needs to be proper, genuine consultation, and that should be planned out. Okay. The other things as well is you want to have redundancy letters in place. So proper redundancy letters drafted properly. Again, considering industrial instruments. There is also contractual obligations. So some employers will have contractual obligations that are different, employment contractual obligations. So you might have, say, larger notice periods. Okay. You might have provisions or specific provisions around confidentiality. You might have specific provisions even about a change in the workplace. So a change in the workplace, which would be a redundancy. So you might have these other obligations, contractual obligations. So remember, if you don't follow those obligations, you would be in breach of contract, which is just another jurisdiction you have to deal with. Okay, so you've got to have that as well. And then, of course, making sure that your payroll team are really au fait with the redundancy pay, the notice pay, if it's going to be paid all out, or it's going to be paid, or it's going to work out that notice period. The other thing as well that people don't realize is they probably should have, and I do this for a lot of clients, some sort of talking points. Now, a lot of people think about the going into the redundancy process, yes, and that's important. It's very, very important. But it's also, yes, the discussion as well, but not just thinking about how to broach the subject of redundancy, but also the after effects. So there are things such as, usually it's going to be a situation of the employee asking why the position be made redundant. There could be further discussions. And again, if they're not covered by an award, you're not obligated to have, for example, a consultation. So it could come out of the blue for some staff as well. So there's going to be those issues. And you might have issues around the pay. Okay, maybe like what's going to be said to the market. So communication internally, communication to clientele, what that's going to look like. You might have issues around final pay. All right, the actual pay as well. There'll be questions around pay, and then usually questions about reputation, and then property is the other one. Can I keep XYZ company property, XYZ mobile phone, whatever the situation might be. So those are the usual things, and then the post-meeting side of things. So what's that going to look like? So the communication to the market, when does that person finish up? Is there going to be a handover process? So these are actually things that people don't really think about. Only think about sort of on that spot. Actually, what I like to do, work with clients, is have that discussion with them, tease that all out, and so when they get into that meeting, they're fully prepared and they know exactly what needs to be done. There's obviously a number of steps that need to be taken. Some might get a bit complicated when there are things like shares involved, right? Profit sharing, bonuses, that there might be some particular provisions around bonuses. How, if that's going to be paid out, are there other commercial agreements that need to be signed over? There might even be intellectual property arrangements or agreements in place. So these are other things that also need to be discussed. Even not simple things, but even things like cars. Like is a car so old we don't need to worry about that? You need to talk to the accountant about disposing the car, or giving the car over, or what are the implications there. So these are these other things that come out of the real obligations around redundancy. And when we're doing this in a crisis, when we're doing this for a crunch moment or crunch moment in time for the business, it's really important to still have that in place. It's really supposed to, because the commission, yes, will look at this in terms of, this is a general redundancy. They'll answer that question, but they'll still have a think about, well, have you, is there still a fairness element? Have we treated the employee fairly as well? Okay, so it's not just about whether it's a general redundancy. It's also, hey, have we done the right thing? And also from a practical perspective, thinking about from the employer perspective, thinking about our perspective, what do we need to put in place in the background as well? And that might include different teams. It might include operational, might include accounts, finance, legal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So if we just go back to that sort of consultation piece, because a lot of people, the assumption is that any form of consultation has to be done by HR. Mm-hmm. Is it only HR that can have that consultation process? Who else can be involved in that process? And are there any specific examples of what not to add in those communications or conversations?
No, the consultation process just needs to be made by decision makers. Yeah, that's the point. It's a clear decision has been made around the redundancy, and therefore we're undertaking a consultation process as per, let's say, a modern award that applies. Okay, and so we're complying with that obligation, and we're here to consider and listen to any comments or response that you might have. Where people make a lot of mistakes is they start to when that question of why comes out, they start going past that and they start interjecting things around behavior, conduct, performance. Now you're intermixing something that is really a redundancy event, and now you're intermixing what really is a more HR related issue. Okay, so intermixing that becomes a massive problem when it comes to unfair dismissal and job protections in particular. Okay, so we don't ever want to walk into that trap. not other issues as well is not having the redundancy letter ready. Okay, not having the documentation drafted and ready to go. I'm not saying give it to them at that point in time, but not having that draft in the background ready to go when it actually occurs. Okay, so just not having you just do documentation ready and not be prepared for the meeting. Yeah, the consultation meeting and what needs to be said. Okay, so really need to train. I actually, for a lot of my clients, I'll actually sit down with the person who's delivering that news and actually talk them through it. What's going to be said? Here's some talking points. What are you going to say? So actually, we role play it a little bit. And I think that's the best way, is just to get that right. Because it's not necessarily that you're going to say the wrong thing, although some people may well do that. But it's probably potentially more about how you communicate that to that employee. Now, there might be some complications around this, and there might be discussion around a deed or release and things like that. Okay, that's a bit more of an elevated discussion that needs to be taking place. But again, another thing to consider as well.
Perfect. Now, you did also mention in terms of sort of legal implications could be general protection, be unfair dismissal. When those legal implications start coming through, who could be targeted, or who could be involved in that process, or who can be affected by those implications in an organisation?
Great question, Leanne, and I think you've been reading a lot of my stuff and listening to a lot of my stuff in the past, so it's a great question. So the answer is, when it comes to, in particular, general protection. So unfair dismissal is just going to be the employer, but general protections is a really good one where they can actually target people who are actually involved in that breach. So let's say the employee argues that the redundancy is not genuine. Okay, so the defense to that would be the redundancy is genuine. All right, but let's say they say it's not. It's because the real reason why my position is being made redundant and therefore being terminated. So the termination of employment. The termination of employment really comes from a complaint I made about my pay, or because I'm going on maternity leave or something along those lines. Okay, which is a protected workplace right. And they argue that it's only because of that protected workplace right. That's why my employment was terminated, not because of redundancy. The redundancy essentially is a sham.
Yeah.
Okay. So that they can go after the employer, but they can also go after the people involved in that breach. That would include, of course, your directors, your managers, your supervisors, human resources, but even also consultants who are involved in that breach as well. So yes, the answer is you could go after employees can go after a number of staff members who are involved in the breach when it comes to general protections. That's why it's, your defense is that, let's say, the redundancy is genuine. We've gone through the process as required. We've gone through the obligation required. We've complied with the contractual obligations. Like, that's your defense. And if you don't have that, yes, you will run into some trouble.
Okay. So redundancies can often present several challenges for a lot of people that are involved, including emotional impact on the employees, those that are leaving the organisation, as well as those that are staying behind, financial strain, potential damage to an organisation's brand and culture. So if you were able to give, and it's a very big topic, and we can probably have another session on this, but if you were to give a quick snapshot or cheat sheet to an employer, if they were preparing to go through a process on what to do and what not to do, what would that look like?
Okay, just a couple of things. First thing, is this a genuine redundancy? Do we have some evidence of that? Okay. Secondly, what are our obligations? So not just for a modern award or an enterprise agreement, but what are our contractual obligations as well? So a lot of contracts have obligations around, say, redundancy pay, for example. There might be some there, redundancy pay and notice is probably the other one. Okay, they might have a larger notice period than under the national employment standards. The third one is prepare for that redundancy meeting. Don't just go in there thinking about the redundancy itself. Actually go in with the actual discussion about answering the question of why. Okay, so practicing what that is, being very clear as to what the reasons are for why. The next one is, okay, well, what happens to the employee? Okay, so in terms of pay, entitlements, communication to the staff, communication to clients or the outside world or customers, what's going to be said of the employee, all these types of things need to be considered. All right. And then the last thing is the post termination, getting, if that's the structure, what's going to be the new structure, advising on it. And then of course the change management side of things. So if we're looking at it from those are probably the simple things. Obviously some nuances everywhere. There's always nuances, but that is the general gist of what you need to do when it comes to a redundancy process.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. We know that obviously, it's important that organizations and employees follow the right process, communicate effectively, and deliver it in the right way. This process is never easy, especially for people that are exiting an organization, but also for those that are delivering the process into the organization as well. So we really appreciate, you sharing your knowledge and wisdom and giving us insight into ensure that companies can mitigate their risks. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Our People to People 2025 Employment and Salary Market Report is now here. This year's report delivers the insights you need to remain competitive, attract top talent, and align with the latest salary trends. Discover what's next in recruitment and workforce planning and position your business for success and growth in 2025. If you are looking to stay ahead of your market, then get in touch with our People to People team today and register to receive your copy. Lastly, if you are looking to grow your HR career or build your HR team, I'm here to help. I can connect you with the right opportunities to set you up for success in 2025. Contact me, Leanne Lazarus, today at leanne@peopletopeople.com.au or on mobile 0431 819 724. Our People to People 2025 Employment and Salary Market Report is now here, and don't be late in getting your copy. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to you joining us for the next session.